how to transform failure into success. We transform failures into success by reframing them and what they mean in our minds. We always control the meaning of events, and that's how we can get through some really difficult circumstances as sensitive people. When we're rejected and we're not called back for a next date, or we're not called for the job after we interview, we have to reframe that as being for reasons that are going to empower us. Maybe that job interview is to help us get ready for the next job that is actually meant for us. Maybe we have to really see ourselves as too talented for the role that we interviewed for. Maybe we're too beautiful for that acting job that we auditioned for. We could be too talented for that school that we applied to and didn't get into. Whatever those things are, we have to reframe them as being for us. We can't just view it in our minds like we're not good enough. And the reason why is because it disempowers us and then it stops us for going for any more opportunities because they're too painful. Why do people stop public speaking when they're young? It's because they had some sort of painful experience in front of a group of people. They got bullied for whatever reason. Could be because of race, could be because of socioeconomic status. But when you were bullied, when you were public speaking, what happens is that activity becomes painful unless you rewrite the narrative in your mind as to why that experience was empowering. There are certain things that we need to do in life. Like we have to go out into the world to find partners, friendships, and even if you own your own business and you're self-sustaining in your income, you have to find clients. We're always going to be needing each other as human beings. We can never fully be an island. And so that means when we deal with human beings, sooner or later, we're going to bump into a damaged person, either personally or professionally. And when that happens, we need to be able to adjust our belief system as to why that event was for us, not why it was against us. So if you're dating, for example, and you believe everybody from the opposite gender is terrible, like that's a very general and damaging belief. What you may want to refine it as is like, there are some bad apples out there that I need to be aware of, and I need to have good boundaries and good strategies to filter those people out so I don't get hurt. But having said that, that doesn't mean necessarily that the whole world is horrible, okay? It doesn't mean that everybody from the opposite gender is horrible. And by the way, it's easy to demonize the opposite gender, but often there are poor role models in your own gender as well that are causing the problems for the opposite gender, okay? So you can't just always blame the opposite gender. They get traumatized too. So you have to give them some grace, but don't allow them to manipulate you or hurt you. So when you are dealing with the traumas, when you're dealing with the failures, maybe you slept with somebody on the third date, for example, and then they didn't call you back. It wasn't serious, even though you thought you'd spent enough time with them. What you need to reframe that as, it was just a starter to my dating life. This failure is a temporary setback and I'm going to move on to find somebody better. Or if it happens in a job, you say, this is a temporary starter job. Just like when you get an apartment, maybe you get a studio apartment and then later you want to expand. You want to get a bigger apartment, a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom or a house. And you say, this is my starting point and I'm going to grow from this. I'm going to do better in the future. That's the way you should see failure, because if you see it as an opportunity to grow, we all grow and change, even places that are good for us, relationships that are excellent for us. Sometimes we outgrow them. Sometimes we need to move on and see other people. It can happen, even in good circumstances. So we have to really frame things correctly, the right way, that it's part of our evolution as human beings. And it's not about staying in one place or staying in one relationship for the rest of our lives. Because as we are noticing in society, many people do not have the same one job over their lifetime. Often we have to change careers or move or do something in order to maintain our livelihood nowadays. And so we have to be flexible. We have to be able to pivot. We have to tell ourselves a better story. We can't be like people in the early 1900s who are used to doing the one thing their whole life, and then when it changes, they attempt to commit suicide. Unfortunately, that was more common than you would think back in the olden days. When things changed, people would get really, really upset. And in our modern era, we can't afford to get upset or get suicidal every time we have a major upset, which will probably be multiple times in our lifetime. I know for me, in my lifetime, there have been 3 major upsets in society and 1 minor one in society. Like, I could think of 2008 was a major upset. And then in 2017, there was an upset, but more locally to where that I lived. Then there was the pandemic in 2020. More recently, it's tariffs in 2025 that we're dealing with. And the thing is, you have to be able to pivot when things don't go well, when things go wrong. You have to be able to move on. And if you can't do that and you're going to be upset and complaining every single time something bad happens, it's going to disempower you. You're not going to want to leave your house. You're not going to want to go for your goals, dreams, and ambitions because it's too painful. You have to soften the blow of these life disappointments internally by changing the meaning of it. I mean, what if worse comes to worse, your whole race is going to be killed for some sort of horrible cause? It has happened in history where one race decides to kill another race because of really horrible prejudice reasons. And in those circumstances, people in the past have had to figure out how they're going to survive and make meaning out of horrible circumstances. And that's where the book Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning comes from. It comes from a World War II concentration camp. And it's really inspirational because it shows you, even in the very worst of circumstances, no matter what's going on in today's society, it can't be as bad as being in a concentration camp, right? That is pretty much the worst of the worst you're going to get. If Viktor Frankl found a way to see things positively and how he was going to grow from the experience, then we can see that in any negative experience that's going on today and find a way to grow from it rather than to cry about it and hide in a ball and be paralyzed in our own home and never come out, okay? That's how we get through it. That's how we become stronger, and that's how we reframe the negative as a positive.